Hi, today we'll look at the iron triangle. What exactly is the iron triangle about? For a project manager, the most important thing that he does is sort of how he balances the project constraints. The constraints here being the cost, the scope, and of course the schedule. And how do these constraints together impact the quality of the product or the project that is being executed? So when we take up cost, we are referring to the money that is being spent. It could be on people, it could be on the machines, the infrastructure, it could be on software, licenses, anything that you are spending money on in order that you are able to perform that project. Next comes the scope. Scope essentially is the amount of work to be achieved. Remember our discussion on the big idea percolating all the way to a final product? That's essentially how the scope travels from being just a vision to being executed or implemented in a project. So you have your stakeholders or you have your business users who have certain requirements that have to be fulfilled. So all those would make up part of the scope. The scope is what you are building essentially. So in the end, the final product will have all the features that they are asked for, all the requirements that they asked for being met. So that's scope. One term that you'll normally hear quite a lot is scope creep. It's essentially the gradual creeping of the scope, little by little, or even big installments sometimes, wherein the scope hasn't been finalized completely. It's not been frozen per se, but it still keeps increasing. Adding a functionality here, adding a web page there, adding a new screen there. That's how it just grows and grows if you're not able to control it. The third constraint, of course, is time. Time is essentially a function of the effort, like how long is my team going to take to fulfill all those requirements, to codify those requirements, to sort of understand those requirements, code them in, test them, and give it a okay. So all those are essentially part of the effort. In terms of duration, it's going to be the amount of calendar months or days or weeks that I'm going to take to fulfill that development. So that's where time comes into the picture. And all of these together affect what will be the product quality. You certainly have certain benchmarks which will denote, okay, what is the quality of the product. For example, there may be some feature-based benchmarks. This particular payment feature has to work. At the same time, there could be some usage-based benchmarks. So all of these essentially have a bearing on the quality. So you measure quality by the expectations that you set out earlier in your requirements. This feature has to work. The time taken for maybe processing payments should be less than 3 milliseconds. The web page should load in less than a second. So those kind of things, that would be part of your quality feature. It has to work free without any bugs. So those are also those things like, okay, the number of bugs that are expected for maybe the most complex of features is less than 5, is less than 10. Whatever you come up with in terms of your quality measurements, so those will be forming part of your quality metrics. So now you would realize wherever I compromise on this, for example, I don't use powerful machines, I don't use the right skilled resources, I'm sort of trying to save cost there, but it will have an impact on the quality unless it's balanced by the rest of the stuff. Similarly, my scope goes on increasing, but the timeline is still the same. Oh, you know what? We need to have this app in for Christmas. So all of them in turn impact the quality of the product. Let me give you an example. In order to save cost, okay, you're willing to do with service of a lesser configuration. Alright? So they won't be powerful enough to support maybe the high-end system that you're looking for. You don't have the right resources on board because Sometimes, yes, you can't afford the right resource or the right level of skill set. In that case, you should be ready to compromise on giving them a little more time or sort of reducing the scope in this case. But if you still want the same scope but still want everything to be done on time, well, that's a tricky call because it will have an impact on quality. Similarly, you're allowing your scope to grow and grow and grow, but you have a fixed deadline. The customer has said, you know what, we need to roll this out for Christmas. There's no way we are going to Christmas without this product. But you're still allowing the scope to creep and creep and creep, which means you're going to be overworking your resources. Instead of 8 to 10 hours, they're going to be working 12, 14, 16, and you see they can't make it. This definitely will have an impact on the quality because there won't be enough time for testing, there won't be enough time given for understanding the requirements clearly, and certainly you're going to have an impact on the quality at the end of it. And sometimes what happens, the time essentially isn't sufficient at all. The estimations were wrong in the first place. People underestimated, okay, what is needed to cover these requirements. In that case, the time duration is going to be it's going to be a challenge basically. You suddenly have resources calling in sick. You suddenly have holidays coming in. You suddenly have like a situation like Corona right now, where it takes time for people to quickly get accustomed to maybe working from home, how they're going to like interact with their teammates. Imagine working in a very closely knit team and suddenly being asked to work from home individually. You need to set up those communication avenues. Till then, it's going to take little time. So those things are what might impact your time. So you will have to consider all this and sort of retain the balance so that your quality is not compromised. So this essentially is the iron triangle. This is something that you will apply all through on every project. Whenever somebody says, okay, I still want you to deliver by this time, but I'm not going to change my scope, I'm only going to increase it, then you know what to ask for. Maybe I can put in more people to ensure that the work goes on faster. Right? Something's got to change. One of the vertices have to be pulled or pushed in order to balance the triangle so that you don't impact the quality. Right? So what are some areas or examples where the constraints are impacted, where there's a pull on any of these vertices of the triangle? Request for additional functionality, this is nothing on this, but the change on the scope front. Resources quitting midway, this happens quite a lot. You have a very senior resource who was working fine and all your estimations were based on how this resource was doing it. And suddenly this resource say, bye bye, I'm moving on, I got a better job. Then yes, that's going to have an impact because you need somebody to take over this resource position, somebody to sort of get into that level, expert level position that the other person was handling, the knowledge transition. So account for all this as part of your risk management, which will anyway cover later. Running out of funds, this is something that definitely happens, and I've seen this happening in a lot of startups as well. One of my customers ran out of funds because they didn't get the promised purchase order. So then they had to cut short the scope, and so that we also were able to like pull back the time in a bit and go with a beta release of the same product. So yes. And unsatisfactory quality. So whenever there's a quality challenge that happens, right? So you then have to make sure that this is made better. It could actually mean all three things. In fact, you could be putting in better resources, right? You could be like taking a stock check on the scope. Okay, do I need to increase or decrease scope? Should I be adding a different functionality that is exactly that's being requested for? And you could also be looking at the timelines. Can I shrink or can I extend the timelines to make sure the quality is better this time? Can I include one more testing cycle which will impact the time again? So think about these constraints. These occur every day. But I'm sure now that you understand the concept of the triangle, the iron triangle, I'm sure you're going to be prepared. All the best.